Hi everyone, Mark here, and today we are doing the fourth entry in the 6 Principles of Training series, covering the 6 Principles of Training by Kondo Kaseki Sensei, translated into English by Derek Steele. Today we will be covering Kokyu, or breathing. The text that we'll be covering today, as always, comes from the book right behind me, Daito-ryu Aiki Jujutsu Hiden Mokuroku Ikkajo. I will link in the description to a free copy of the text that's available at koryu.com. We will do, as per usual, a first full reading of the text to have a bird-eye view of the topic at hand, after which we will rewind to the beginning and do a sentence-by-sentence breakdown and go a little bit more into the details. So, without further ado, let's get started. Kokyu, breathing. Kokyu refers to breath or breathing. We generate physical power and movement more easily when exhaling, or in some cases when stopping our breath, both of which are states of yang. The opposite is true of inhaling, an yin state. Thus, techniques are usually performed while exhaling, often with one breath from start to finish. Similarly, it is considered ideal to time any attack to an instant where your opponent has just exhaled and has just started to inhale again. We take advantage of the openings in an opponent's defenses offered by yin states, with many counterattacks and defenses timed to coincide with the instant your opponent enters or is made to enter a yin state. So that is the text for today. Just talking about breathing, essentially, how it can be leveraged in broad strokes. Let's rewind to the beginning and try to do a sentence-by-sentence breakdown and get a little bit more detail out of the text that is presented to us. Kokyu refers to breath or breathing. Pretty straightforward. I mean, it's pretty much a truism. The characters for the in kanji for Kokyu basically are, sucking in and pushing out. Basically, inhale and exhale. So there's nothing really more to say about that. We generate physical power and movement more easily when exhaling, or in some cases when stopping our breath, both of which are states of yang. Little comment here, you will see in this text that the Chinese terms are used instead of the Japanese terms. This isn't because there is a Chinese connection to Daito-ryu. It's just basically a choice of translation by Mr. Steele, which I've seen done by other translator of Daito-ryu content basically in the past. I suspect it was done basically because the terms in and yo that are used in Japanese are far less frequently known. So just talking about yin-yang basically, while not really English terms, obviously, it was probably presupposed that they would be more broadly understood by the target audience. So it's really just a choice of terms. But here we're really talking about yin and yo. So yo being yang and yin being yin, right? Now more to the actual point of that sentence. This is, interestingly enough, something that I've seen in track and field. So a few lifetimes ago, I was doing some track and field. I was a 800-meter sprinter. And I was also obviously training with people from other disciplines. Some people were national level athletes, 100-meter sprinters. And one thing that really stuck to mind when it comes down to the notion of breathing that is discussed here more broadly and more particularly in the case of the sentence is that this is all stuff that I've heard 100-meter coaches talk about, actually. Now, obviously, different coaches, different philosophies and doctrines, but I've seen coaches basically say, when you basically get set, you just suck in the air, you take your position you basically lift from the blocks, and then when the start signal is basically you get a start signal, that's where you start to exhale, right? The idea being that exhaling puts you in a position of strength. You see it in tennis as well with something that looks a little bit like a kiai, I guess, when people are hitting the ball, right? Again, the idea that exhaling basically has some effect on performance. I've also heard about stopping your breath. Basically, this was not from one of my coaches, but it was from somebody else's coach that I've heard, I believe. But basically, the idea that you should just stop your breath for the first 30 or 50 meters of your sprint, and then use the oxygen in your lungs to just keep pushing out for the remaining 50 meters, or some variations of that. The point I'm trying to make here is that it's kind of phrased in a way that is a little bit abstract here, which may be confused for something that holds some weird mystical meaning, but I don't think that's what we're talking about here. This is something that I've heard in sports physiology and some sports philosophy and doctrines. I actually used that kind of idea in the past, so it's really more. It's relatively close to those ideas here. The opposite is true of inhaling a yin state. Here, to put it in a really simple way, if you need something, you are weaker than if you do not need something. If you need to breathe because your lungs are empty, you're in a weakened state, and that's going to take some resources. You breathe naturally normally, but it's still going to be distracting if you actually have to breathe, so to speak. Or especially if you're like out of breath, I should say. So it's nothing really special here. You need to breathe. You're weaker than if you can hold your breath for a few seconds, right? That's kind of the idea here. Thus, techniques that are usually performed while exhaling, often with one breath from start to finish. So again, like going back to to sprinting, this is again something that I've heard before in some other context. So it's not really super surprising actually to find in a context of martial arts. One thing I would like to point out here is that I don't necessarily know that there's ever really been a study on the physiological impact of sustained breathing on power. If there has been, please link to it in the comments below. But, again, the last time I checked was 10, 15, 20 years ago, so it's been a while. But at the time, basically, when I was discussing with physiology teachers and people that knew more about this than I did, they seem to basically point more in the direction of, well, it actually may have a psychological effect of some kind. That while there might be some physiological effect, we don't know whether they are significant enough to have an impact on performance, or whether they actually have an impact at all in the first place. It kind of makes sense. It feels like, intuitively speaking, that it should have an impact on the body. But at least at the time, it didn't seem like there were any definitive studies that would really point in that direction. But the idea that it kind of, puts you in a certain mental state, I think kind of makes sense. Especially if your breathing is well controlled. People calm themselves down with breathing in and breathing out. So that's an example of breathing affecting mental state here. That it actually puts you in a mental state where you feel a little bit more empowered, or whatnot. Actually, and perhaps that gives you some sort of edge. Actually, kind of makes sense, I think, to some degree. That's that. Continuing, thus techniques are usually performed while exhaling, often with one breath from start to finish. Similarly, it is considered ideal to time any attack to an instant where your opponent has just exhaled and has just started to inhale again. So this is more tactical than anything else. If you see that somebody is out of air and you attack at that point, you attack at a point where they're weaker. So again, probably easier said than done, But if you can time an attack like this, I mean, that's, again, any edge you can get is good, right? And that's really the idea here. We take advantage of the opening in an opponent's defenses offered by Yin state with many counterattacks and defenses timed to coincide with the instant your opponent enters or is made to enter a Yin state. That last sentence is really, I think, is the one sentence that is less generic in nature and really pertains more to Daito-ryu's doctrines in regards to hand-to-hand combat, essentially, or at least, to like the lessons taught through the kata. It's just the idea that basically you kind of, read a little bit your opponent, not only in terms of intent, but in terms of, quote unquote, health status, like, are they breathing quickly, slowly, and you use that to your advantage, right? It's a little bit the same thing as in, boxing or, striking arts, where, you would try to strike at a moment at a certain, in a certain way, in a certain timing, where, the person might be basically out of breath or out of oxygen, I should say, just so that your strike may have a little bit more impact, right? That might be whether they actually cause more damage or just really make the opponent that much more uncomfortable in the moment. Again, this is all stuff that's used to gain a certain advantage, right? Overall, the element of gaining power through breathing, I think, is pretty much something you will find in any, at least Chinese or Japanese martial arts to some degree. The more traditional arts tend to discuss the subject a little bit more. And while I don't think there's been many, if any, definitive studies on the subject of whether that type of breathing really actually has the perceived impact it has. It seems to be it seems to be well understood beyond just the world of Japanese and Chinese martial arts that breathing out gives you power, breathing in takes power away from you to some degree. Be it in short breath when you're doing, you're just pushing a scream out, or for a longer period where you need sustained power for a few seconds, for instance, right? Sometimes you kind of have to go with what you have, be it in competitive sports or in classical martial arts. And that's where tradition to some degree comes in, right? Sometimes there's things that are just known in the tradition that are not really scientifically proven yet. But I mean, it just kind of work, right? It's like quantum physics, there's stuff we don't really exactly understand why it works, but it works, and we can still build electronics based on that knowledge, right? On the knowledge that, certain phenomena actually happen the way we know them to happen. So it's kind of a little bit of the same thing here, if I had to draw an analogy. There is a tactical element to it. That's something that's really more, esoteric to the tradition. It's something that's kept in-house, so I won't be discussing it today. But it's also something to keep in mind. So that's it for today. Next time we will be talking about kuzushi, or unbalancing. We're almost done with the series. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them down in the comments down below. And as always, thank you for your time, and until next time.